The sunlight filtering through my kitchen window couldn't warm the chill that had settled in my bones. It had been exactly 3 months since Sarah, my daughter-in-law, had told me I was no longer welcome in their home. 3 months of missed Sunday dinners. 3 months without seeing my grandchildren's faces light up when I walked through the door. 3 months of wondering where exactly I had gone wrong. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I stared at the calendar on my refrigerator, red X's marking the days since I'd last seen 8-year-old Emma and 5-year-old Noah. My coffee had grown cold, forgotten in my hands as I lost myself in memories of bedtime stories and Saturday morning pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. The silence in my modest 2-bedroom home was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding gift from my late wife Margaret's parents over 40 years ago. The phone sat on the counter, tempting me to call my son David again, but the last 3 attempts had ended the same way. Sarah answering, her voice cooling instantly upon recognizing mine, followed by excuses about why they couldn't talk right now. David's busy with work, or we're just heading out the door, or the most painful, the kids are doing homework and can't be disturbed. I took a deep breath and rinsed out my coffee mug. At 68, I wasn't used to having my days so empty. After 43 years of teaching high school history, retirement had been an adjustment, but Margaret and I had planned for it together. Weekend trips, gardening projects, more time with the grandkids. Then cancer took her 2 years ago, and everything changed. David had been my rock during that time, calling daily, bringing the family over for dinner twice a week. Until Sarah decided I was becoming too dependent. The words still stung. "You call too often," she'd said during that final visit. "You expect us to include you in everything. You need to build your own life, Frank. We need our space as a family." I hadn't fought it, hadn't argued, hadn't pointed out that in the 2 years since Margaret died, I'd joined a book club, volunteered at the local library, and taken up woodworking. I'd built a life that wasn't entirely dependent on them, but they were still the center of my world. They were all the family I had left. I glanced at the woodworking project sitting half-finished in my garage, a dollhouse for Emma's upcoming birthday. Would I even be allowed to give it to her? The thought made my chest tighten. My cell phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. For a moment, hope surged. Maybe it was David, but the screen showed my friend Robert's name instead. "Morning, Frank," he said when I answered. "Still on for coffee today?" Robert had been my closest friend since we started teaching at the same school 30 years ago. His wife, Diane, and Margaret had been close as well. After Margaret passed, Robert and Diane had made sure I wasn't alone too often. "Yeah," I said, trying to inject some enthusiasm into my voice. "Usual place at 10? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. At the coffee shop, Robert was already waiting at our regular table by the window. His silver hair was neatly combed, his sweater perfectly pressed. Robert had always been the more put-together of the two of us. Margaret used to joke that he looked like he stepped out of a catalog, while I looked like I'd been through a windstorm. "You look terrible," he said bluntly as I sat down. I managed a weak smile. "Good to see you, too. Have you heard from them?" He didn't need to specify who them was. I shook my head. "Not a word. I drove by their house yesterday." Robert's eyebrows shot up. "Tell me you didn't stop." "Of course not," I said, feeling slightly defensive. I wanted to see if they were okay. Emma had that dance recital yesterday. I saw them loading into the car. She looked beautiful in her costume." Robert's expression softened. "Frank, this isn't healthy." "What am I supposed to do, Robert?" "They're my family." "You could try standing up for yourself. Tell your son it's unacceptable for his wife to ban his father from their home." I stirred my coffee, watching the cream create swirling patterns. "It's complicated. David's caught in the middle. If I force the issue, I might lose him completely. And if you don't, you'll continue this half-existence," Robert countered. "You're allowing Sarah to dictate the terms of your relationship with your son and grandchildren." A flash of anger surged through me, surprising in its intensity. "You think I don't know that? You think this doesn't kill me every day. But what choice do I have? An elderly couple at the next table glanced over, and I realized I'd raised my voice. I took a deep breath, composing myself. "I'm sorry," Robert said softly. "I just hate seeing you like this." I nodded, the anger dissipating as quickly as it had come. "I know, I don't want to make things worse." We changed the subject after that, talking about the latest book club selection and Robert's plans to take Diane to Europe for their 40th anniversary. Normal things. Things that didn't make my heart ache. As we were finishing our coffee, my phone vibrated with a text message. I nearly knocked over my cup in my haste to check it. It was from David. "Dad, can you come over tomorrow around 6? Just you and me. Don't tell Sarah I reached out." My heart hammered against my ribs. I showed the message to Robert, whose eyebrows nearly disappeared into his hairline. "Well," he said, "that's interesting. What do you think it means?" Robert shrugged. "Only one way to find out." That night I barely slept. My mind raced with possibilities. Was David finally standing up to Sarah? Had something happened? Was he sick? Were they moving away? By morning, I'd concocted a dozen scenarios, each more unlikely than the last. I spent the day cleaning my already clean house and working on Emma's dollhouse, trying to keep my hands busy and my mind from spiraling. When 5:30 finally arrived, I got into my car and drove to the small subdivision where David and Sarah had built their dream home 5 years earlier. Instead of pulling into their driveway, I parked a few houses down as David had instructed in a follow-up text. At precisely 6 o'clock, I saw him walk out to get the mail, a signal that it was safe for me to approach. My son looked tired. The dark circles under his eyes stood out against his pale skin, and he'd lost weight since I'd last seen him up close. When he spotted me walking toward him, his expression was a mixture of relief and anxiety. "Hey, Dad," he said, giving me a quick, tight hug. "Let's walk." We strolled through the neighborhood in silence for a few minutes, the evening air cool against my face. Finally, David spoke. "I'm sorry," he began. "About everything. About not standing up to Sarah. About not bringing the kids to see you. About—" his voice cracked slightly. "About letting this go on for so long." I wanted to tell him it was okay, that I understood, but the words wouldn't come. Because it wasn't okay. None of this was okay. "What's going on, David?" I asked instead. He stopped walking and turned to face me. "Sarah's been different lately. Controlling. Not just with you, but with me, with the kids, with everything. She monitors my phone, checks my emails, questions me if I'm late from work." I tried to hide my surprise. The Sarah I knew, or thought I knew, had always seemed so confident, so put together. "How long has this been happening?" "It started gradually after Mom died," he said. "At first, I thought she was just stepping up, taking care of things because I was grieving. But it never stopped. It got worse." We resumed walking, David's pace quickening with his agitation. "Last month I found out she's been going through our finances without telling me. She withdrew almost all the money from our joint savings account and opened a separate account in just her name." My stomach dropped. "David, that's—" "I know what it is," he interrupted. "And there's more. She's been telling the kids things about you. That you're getting confused. That you can't be trusted to watch them alone anymore." The injustice of it burned in my chest. I'd never given them any reason to question my faculties or my ability to care for my grandchildren. Yes, I'd been devastated by Margaret's death, but I hadn't lost my mind. "Why?" I asked, the single word carrying the weight of months of hurt. David shook his head. "I don't know for sure, but I have a theory. After Mom died, you mentioned updating your will, making sure everything would go to me and the kids someday." I nodded slowly. "Sarah was there when I brought it up. And you mentioned that the house was paid off, that you had your teacher's pension, your investments." Understanding dawned, cold and hard. "She thinks I have money." "You do have money, Dad. Not a fortune, but enough. A paid-off house in a good neighborhood, no debt, solid retirement income. To someone who grew up with nothing, like Sarah did, that looks like wealth." I remembered then something Margaret had said years ago when David first brought Sarah home. "She's looking for security," my wise wife had observed. "Make sure she loves our son for himself, not for what he can provide." We brushed off the concern then. Sarah and David seemed genuinely in love, and over time she'd become like a daughter to us. Or so I thought. "What do you want to do?" I asked David, choosing my words carefully. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his mother's that it made my heart clench. "I don't know. I love her, Dad. And she's a good mother, despite everything. The kids adore her. But I can't live like this anymore. And I can't keep you from the kids. It's not right." We had circled back to his house now. A light came on in the front window. Sarah, wondering where he was. "I need to go," David said, anxiety creeping back into his voice. "But I wanted you to know what's happening. And I wanted to say I'm sorry." "What can I do?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "Nothing yet. Let me handle this. But would you be free on Saturday? Sarah's going to her sister's overnight. I want to bring the kids to see you." For the first time in months, genuine hope bloomed in my chest. "I'll be there. Anytime. All day." David nodded, a small smile breaking through his worried expression. "I've missed you, Dad." "I've missed you too, son." I watched him walk back to his house, shoulders squared, as if preparing for battle. Only when he disappeared inside did I return to my car, my mind reeling with everything I'd learned. Sarah wasn't just keeping me away because she thought I was too dependent. She was isolating David, controlling the family's finances, poisoning my grandchildren against me. And possibly, most troublingly, she was after what little wealth I had managed to accumulate in my modest teacher's life. As I drove home, a plan began to form in my mind. Not a plan for revenge. I wasn't interested in hurting Sarah, despite everything. But a plan to protect my son, my grandchildren, and yes, myself. Margaret would have known exactly what to do. She had always been the strategist in our relationship, thinking 3 steps ahead while I was still processing step 1. I could almost hear her voice. "Don't fight Sarah directly, she'll only use that against you. Be smarter, be patient." By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew my next move. It wouldn't be dramatic or confrontational. It wouldn't involve ultimatums or threats. It would be quiet, methodical, and ultimately, I hoped, effective. The next morning, I called my lawyer, a kind but no-nonsense woman named Patricia who had handled Margaret's estate. "Frank," she said warmly when her secretary put me through. "It's been a while. How are you?" "I've been better," I admitted. "I need some advice." 2 hours later, I sat across from Patricia in her office, having laid out the entire situation. She listened without interruption, taking occasional notes, her expression giving nothing away. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "So, to summarize, you're concerned your daughter-in-law may be financially abusing your son, isolating him from family support, and potentially eyeing your assets for future acquisition." Put so bluntly, it sounded almost ridiculous. But I nodded. "Yes, and I want to protect everyone involved, including the grandchildren." Patricia tapped her pen against her notepad. "First things first. Your current will leaves everything to David, correct?" "Yes, with provisions that if anything happens to him, everything goes into a trust for the grandchildren, which David would manage until they're of age." "And if something happens to both you and David?" I frowned. I hadn't considered that scenario. I suppose Sarah would manage the trust. Patricia's expression turned grave. "Based on what you've told me, that arrangement may need reconsideration." By the time I left Patricia's office, I had a clear path forward. I would update my will, creating a more complex trust structure that would protect my assets regardless of what happened to David or me. I would document every interaction with Sarah and David moving forward, and most importantly, I would quietly gather evidence of Sarah's financial manipulation, creating a record that could be used if David ever decided to leave. "Remember," Patricia cautioned as I was leaving, "the goal here isn't to punish Sarah or force David's hand. It's to create safety nets and options." I understood. This wasn't about winning or revenge. It was about protection and preparation. Margaret would have approved. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. I spent Friday cleaning the house from top to bottom and finishing Emma's dollhouse. I baked chocolate chip cookies, Noah's favorite, and bought ingredients for homemade pizza, an activity the kids had always enjoyed helping with. When the doorbell rang at noon on Saturday, my heart was racing like a teenager's on a first date. I opened the door to find David standing there, Emma and Noah half hidden behind his legs, looking up at me with uncertainty that broke my heart. "Grandpa?" Emma said hesitantly, as if she wasn't quite sure it was me. I knelt down to their level, fighting back tears. "Hi, sweethearts. I've missed you so much." Noah was the first to break, launching himself into my arms with a sob. "Mommy said you were sick and couldn't play with us anymore." Emma followed more cautiously, her small arms wrapping around my neck. "Are you better now, Grandpa?" Over their heads, I met David's gaze, saw the pain and guilt written plainly on his face. "I'm fine," I assured them, my voice rough with emotion. "I've never been sick. I've just missed you both very much." The afternoon unfolded like a gift. We made pizzas, rolling out dough and creating silly toppings patterns. We played board games that had gathered dust in my closet. Emma discovered the dollhouse, her eyes widening with delight as I showed her the tiny furniture I'd crafted by hand, each piece made with love and memories of Margaret, who had taught me woodworking in the first place. "This is for me," she whispered, carefully touching the miniature staircase. "For your birthday." I confirmed, "But you can take it home today if you want." David watched us from the doorway, a complex mixture of emotions playing across his face. When the kids were engrossed in exploring the dollhouse, he pulled me aside. "Thank you for this," he said quietly. "They've been asking about you," Sarah told them. He trailed off, unable to complete the thought. "It's not your fault," I said, though part of me wanted to shake him, to demand to know how he could have let this happen. But I understood the slow, insidious nature of manipulation. How it crept in until suddenly you found yourself living someone else's version of your life. "I'm going to fix this," he promised. "I've been talking to a counselor. She's helping me see things more clearly." Hope surged within me, but I tempered it with caution. "Take your time. Do what's right for you and the kids. I'll be here, no matter what." The day ended too quickly. As they prepared to leave, Noah clung to me, unwilling to let go. "Can we come back tomorrow?" he pleaded. "Not tomorrow, buddy," David answered for me. "But soon. I promise." Emma carried her dollhouse carefully to the car, treating it like the treasure it was. Before they drove away, she rolled down her window. "I love you, Grandpa. Don't get sick again, okay?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As their car disappeared around the corner, I felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter because I'd seen them, held them, confirmed they were okay. Heavier because the road ahead was uncertain and potentially treacherous. Back inside, I noticed Noah had left his favorite action figure on the coffee table. I picked it up, running my thumb over the worn plastic. He'd want it back, which meant another opportunity to see them. A small victory, but I'd take it. The phone rang as I was washing the dinner dishes. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. My hand hovered over the answer button, dread pooling in my stomach. But avoiding her would only make things worse. "Hello, Sarah," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Where are they?" she demanded without preamble, her voice tight with anger. "David and the kids? They left about an hour ago. They should be home by now." "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "You know David wasn't supposed to take the kids to see you. You're manipulating him, trying to turn him against me." I took a deep breath, remembering Patricia's advice. Document everything, stay calm, don't escalate. "Sarah, I'm not trying to turn anyone against you. David wanted the children to visit their grandfather. That's all." "You've never liked me," she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "You and Margaret always thought I wasn't good enough for your precious son. Well, Guess what? He chose me. We have a life together. A life that doesn't have room for your neediness and interference. The old me might have lashed back, might have told her exactly what I thought of her actions. But something had shifted in me since my conversation with David. I understood now that Sarah's behavior came from her own insecurities and fears. Understanding didn't excuse it, but it helped me respond with clarity rather than anger. "I've always liked you, Sarah," I said quietly. "Margaret and I welcomed you into our family with open arms. I still consider you family. But family doesn't cut off family without cause." "Cause?" She laughed bitterly. "How about the way you call constantly? The way you expect to be included in everything? The way you make David feel guilty for having his own life?" There was a kernel of truth there that stung. After Margaret died, I had leaned heavily on David, perhaps too heavily at first. But I'd recognized that and made changes. I'd built my own life, as she'd demanded. It just wasn't enough for her. "I'm sorry if my behavior after Margaret's death was burdensome," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Grief can make us clutch too tightly to those we love. But I've respected your boundaries these past 3 months. I haven't called, I haven't stopped by. I've given you the space you asked for. And now you're sneaking around behind my back with my husband," she countered. "Sarah," I said, my patience wearing thin despite my best intentions. "He's my son, has been for 40 years. That relationship doesn't disappear because you wish it would. Just stay away from us," she hissed. "All of us, or you'll regret it." The line went dead before I could respond. I set the phone down slowly, my hands trembling slightly. Then I went to my desk, opened a new document on my computer, and recorded every word of the conversation while it was still fresh in my mind. When I finished, I saved the file in a folder labeled Sarah Documentation and closed my laptop. As I got ready for bed that night, I thought about what Sarah had said. Was I really the interfering, needy father-in-law she described? Had I somehow created this situation without realizing it? Margaret's photograph sat on my nightstand, her smile frozen in time. "What do you think, love?" I murmured, touching the glass gently. Am I the villain in this story? But I knew what Margaret would say. She would remind me that relationships are complex, that few situations have clear heroes and villains. She would tell me to look at my actions objectively, to make amends where needed, but not to accept blame that wasn't mine to carry. And most of all, she would tell me to fight for my family, not with anger or accusations, but with patience, wisdom, and unshakable love. As I drifted off to sleep, I made a promise to myself and to Margaret's memory. I would not let Sarah's fear and control destroy our family. I would stand firm, but with compassion. I would be the father David needed, and the grandfather Emma and Noah deserved. And I would do it all without becoming the bitter, angry man Sarah accused me of being. The battle for my family had begun, but it would be fought on my terms, with dignity, patience, and an open heart, because that's what Margaret would have done. And because, in the end, that was the only way to truly win. The morning after Sarah's call, I woke early. Sleep had been elusive, my mind churning with worries and half-formed plans. I made coffee on autopilot, the rich aroma filling my quiet kitchen as sunlight slowly crept across the worn tile floor. Noah's action figure still sat on the counter where I'd placed it, a small plastic reminder of yesterday's brief happiness. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Sarah knows about yesterday. Things are tense. We'll call when I can." I sighed, setting the phone down carefully as if it might break. Part of me had hoped Sarah would accept the visit as a one-time event, that she might see how happy it had made the children, and soften her stance. Foolish, perhaps, but hope is sometimes all we have. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw a delivery person holding a large package. I signed for it, puzzled. I hadn't ordered anything, and carried it to the kitchen table. Inside was Emma's dollhouse, along with a handwritten note in Sarah's sharp, angular script. "We don't need your gifts. Stay away from my family." The cruelty of it took my breath away. This wasn't about boundaries or independence. This was punishment, pure and simple. And worse, it punished Emma as well, depriving her of something she had clearly treasured. I ran my hand over the tiny roof, remembering Emma's delighted expression when she'd first seen it. Months of work, each piece crafted with love and memories, now returned like unwanted charity. The unfairness of it burned in my throat. I was still staring at the dollhouse when my phone rang. Robert's name flashed on the screen. "Morning," I answered, trying to keep the emotion from my voice. "You okay?" he asked immediately. "You sound off." I told him about the previous day's visit, Sarah's angry call, and now the returned dollhouse. As I spoke, my voice grew steadier, the initial shock giving way to a calm determination. "That's crossing a line," Robert said when I finished. "Using the kids as pawns. What does David say about all this?" "He's caught in the middle," I replied. "He's starting to see what's happening, but Sarah has spent years isolating him. It's not easy to break free from that kind of control. So what's your next move?" I considered the question, thinking of my conversation with Patricia. "I'm documenting everything. Building a case, I suppose. Not to use against Sarah, necessarily, but to help David see the pattern more clearly. And, in the meantime? In the meantime, I respect Sarah's boundaries in public, while finding ways to maintain my relationship with David and the kids. I won't play her game, but I won't abandon my family either." "That's a fine line to walk," Robert warned. "It's the only line available to me," I replied. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After hanging up, I carefully rewrapped the dollhouse and placed it in my spare bedroom closet. Then I sent a brief text to David. "Got the dollhouse. It's safe here whenever Emma wants it. Love you all." I didn't mention Sarah's note. David had enough to deal with without adding more fuel to the fire. The next week passed in a strange limbo. I went through the motions of my daily routine. Book club on Tuesday, volunteering at the library on Wednesday, coffee with Robert on Thursday. But my mind was never fully present. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, hoping it was David. When he finally called on Friday evening, I was in the garage, mindlessly sanding a piece of wood that would eventually become part of a new project. "Dad?" he said when I answered, his voice low. "I can talk for a few minutes. Sarah's at the store with the kids." "How are you?" I asked, hearing the strain in his voice. "Hanging in there. Listen, I'm sorry about the dollhouse. I didn't know she'd done that until after the fact." "It's okay. It's waiting here for Emma whenever she wants it." There was a pause then. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how this isn't just about you, it's about control, and I'm starting to see it everywhere." A weight lifted from my chest. That's good, David. Recognition is the first step." "Yeah, well," he sighed, "it doesn't make it any easier. I love her, Dad. Despite everything. And the kids love her. She's a great mother in so many ways." "I believe that," I said. And I did. People are complex, rarely all good or all bad. This isn't about demonizing Sarah. It's about recognizing unhealthy patterns and addressing them. The counselor said the same thing. David admitted. She thinks Sarah's behavior stems from her childhood. Her parents' divorce left her with nothing. Her dad disappeared, her mom struggled. Sarah had to fight for everything she ever got. It made sense. Fear of loss can make people cling too tightly, control too much. Understanding that didn't excuse Sarah's behavior, but it helped me see her as human rather than a villain. "What can I do?" I asked. "Nothing right now," David said, his voice dropping even lower. "I've suggested couples counseling. Sarah's resistant, but I'm working on it. In the meantime, I'm trying to regain some independence. I've opened my own bank account. Just for my personal expenses, nothing that would upset the household finances." Pride swelled in my chest. "That's a good step." "The kids miss you," he added. "Noah keeps asking when we can go back to Grandpa's. I've told him soon, but you need to move carefully." I finished for him. "I understand. Tell them I love them, and that Noah's action figure is safe here whenever he wants it." David chuckled, the sound warming me from the inside. "He's been looking everywhere for that thing. I'll let him know." After we hung up, I stood in the garage for a long time, letting the conversation settle in my mind. David was taking small steps toward reclaiming his independence. He was seeing Sarah's behavior for what it was, not just meanness or dislike of me, but a pattern of control rooted in her own insecurities. It wasn't a solution, but it was progress, and sometimes progress is enough to keep hope alive. The next morning, I woke with a renewed sense of purpose. David was fighting for his independence. I needed to focus on what I could control. First on my list, updating my will and estate plan as Patricia had advised. I spent the morning gathering financial documents, making notes, and creating a clear picture of my assets. It wasn't a vast fortune by any means, but it was substantial enough. My house, paid off and in a neighborhood that had appreciated significantly over the years. My teacher's pension. Investments Margaret and I had carefully built over decades of frugal living. A small life insurance policy. Monday morning, I returned to Patricia's office with a folder of documents and a clearer vision of what I wanted to accomplish. "I've been thinking about the trust structure," I told her after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "I want to make sure my assets are protected not just for David and the grandchildren, but from potential misuse." Patricia nodded, taking the folder from me. "That's wise. We can create a trust with specific conditions for distribution. For instance, funds for the grandchildren's education can be paid directly to the educational institutions. Health expenses can go directly to providers." "And what about David?" I asked. "I want him to have access to his inheritance, but I'm concerned Sarah might pressure him to use it in ways he wouldn't choose himself." Patricia finished for me. "We can address that too. Perhaps a structured distribution, or appointing a trusted third party as co-trustee." By the time I left Patricia's office 2 hours later, I had a comprehensive plan in place. My assets would be protected in a trust that would provide for my family while preventing misuse. It wasn't about cutting Sarah out. She was still David's wife and my grandchildren's mother, but about ensuring my life's work benefited my family as I intended. I felt lighter as I drove home, as if a burden had been lifted. I wasn't being cruel or vengeful. I was being prudent. Margaret would have approved. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Sarah's silver SUV. My heart rate quickened. What was she doing here? I approached cautiously, scanning the area. The SUV was empty. Had she come to confront me? Was she inside my house somehow? The answer came as I rounded the corner to my backyard. Sarah stood at my back door, peering through the glass, her hand cupped around her eyes to block the glare. "Sarah?" I called, keeping my voice neutral. She whirled around, eyes wide with surprise, then narrowing with defiance. She wasn't dressed for confrontation. Yoga pants, a loose sweater, hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, but her posture was tense, defensive. "What are you doing here?" I asked, maintaining my distance. She straightened, chin lifting. "I wanted to see where you live, what kind of place you have." The admission shocked me with its baldness. "You could have asked for a tour," I said mildly. "Would you have given me one?" she challenged. "Of course. Your family." Something flickered across her face. Doubt, perhaps, or confusion. "You have a nice house," she said finally. "Big, valuable, in a good neighborhood." I understood then. She was assessing my wealth, confirming her suspicions about what might eventually come to David, and by extension, to her. "It's comfortable," I agreed. "Margaret and I bought it when property in this area was much more affordable. We were lucky." "Lucky," she repeated, a hint of bitterness in her tone. "Some people make their own luck." "True," I said, "and some people are born into circumstances that make luck harder to come by." She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. For a moment, the mask slipped, and I glimpsed something vulnerable beneath. The girl who had grown up with nothing, who had fought for everything she had, who lived in constant fear of losing it all. "David told me about your childhood," I said gently. "It sounds like it was very difficult." Her eyes flashed. "I don't need your pity." "It's not pity, Sarah. It's understanding. We're not so different, you and I. We both want security for our families. We both want to protect what matters to us." She shook her head, but I could see my words had hit home. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you love my son and my grandchildren," I said. "I know you're a good mother. I know you're afraid of losing what you've built." "Stop," she said, her voice suddenly less certain. "Just stop." "Sarah," I took a cautious step forward. "I'm not your enemy. I've never been your enemy. All I want is to be part of my family's life. That's all." For a heartbeat, I thought I might have reached her. Something in her expression softened, a crack in the armor. But then her phone buzzed, breaking the moment. She glanced at the screen, and her face hardened once more. "I have to go," she said abruptly. "The kids are finishing soccer practice." She brushed past me, heading for her car. I didn't try to stop her. "Sarah." I called as she reached the driver's door. She paused, not looking back. "The dollhouse is here whenever Emma wants it." She didn't respond, just slid into the car and drove away, leaving me standing in my driveway with the strange feeling that something significant had just happened, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what. Inside, I did a quick check of the house. Nothing seemed disturbed or missing. Sarah hadn't broken in. She'd just been looking through the windows. Assessing. Calculating. I called David immediately, unsure whether I should tell him about Sarah's visit. It might increase tensions between them, but he deserved to know what was happening. He didn't answer. I left a brief message asking him to call when he could, then sat at my kitchen table, trying to process the encounter. Had I made progress with Sarah, or driven her further away? Had my words about understanding her fears reached her at all? Or had I simply confirmed her suspicion that I saw her as damaged, needy? The answers would come in time, I supposed. For now, all I could do was continue on the path I'd chosen, documenting, preparing, protecting, but also reaching out with empathy whenever possible. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself in the spare bedroom, staring at the carefully wrapped dollhouse. On impulse, I unwrapped it and began working on it again, adding small details I'd planned but hadn't completed before giving it to Emma. Tiny picture frames with miniature family photos, a bookshelf with books the size of postage stamps, a little swing in the backyard. I worked until dawn, losing myself in the precision and care of the task. When I finally stepped back to assess my work, I realized what I'd done. I'd created a perfect miniature of a happy family home, the kind where everyone felt safe and valued. It was a wish, a hope, a prayer shaped in wood and paint and tiny, perfect details. A vision of what I wanted for my son, my grandchildren, and yes, for Sarah too, if she could only see that there was room for all of us in this family. As I wrapped it carefully once more and returned it to the closet, I made a silent promise. I would not give up on that vision, no matter how long it took to realize. The following Thursday, I met Robert for our usual coffee. I'd just settled into my chair when he leaned forward, eyes serious. "Frank, there's something you should know," he said without preamble. "I saw Sarah yesterday at the community center. She was talking to Jim Reynolds." My brow furrowed. "The real estate agent?" Robert nodded grimly. "They were looking at property listings on his tablet." Very intense conversation. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Jim Reynolds specialized in high-end properties in our area. If Sarah was consulting him, "You think she's planning to sell David's house?" I asked, trying to make sense of it. "Or looking at new properties," Robert suggested. "Maybe thinking about what they could afford if certain assets became available." The implication was clear: my assets. "That's quite a leap," I cautioned, though the uneasiness persisted. She could be helping a friend look for a house, or considering an investment property. Robert gave me a skeptical look. With everything else that's happened, the timing seemed suspicious. He wasn't wrong, but I was wary of assuming the worst without evidence. "I'll mention it to David," I said finally, casually. "See what he knows." Robert nodded, seemingly satisfied with that approach. We moved on to other topics. His upcoming anniversary trip, the latest drama in our book club, but the information about Sarah and Jim Reynolds lingered in my mind like a warning bell. That evening, David called as promised. He sounded more relaxed than he had in weeks. Sarah agreed to couples counseling, he said, obvious relief in his voice. "We had our first session yesterday. It was intense but good, I think." "That's wonderful news," I said, genuinely pleased. Counseling was a significant step forward, a sign Sarah was willing to work on their relationship. "She admitted some things," David continued, "about feeling insecure in our marriage, about worrying I'd leave her like her father left her mother. She said keeping you away was partly because she was afraid you'd convince me she wasn't good enough." "Oh, David," I sighed. "I would never do that. I know, Dad, and deep down, I think she knows it too." The counselor helped her see that her fear of abandonment is driving a lot of her controlling behavior. It was progress. Real progress. Yet I couldn't quite shake the uneasiness from Robert's revelation. "David," I said carefully, "has Sarah mentioned anything about real estate lately? Looking at new houses, maybe? Or investments?" The pause that followed was too long for comfort. "How did you know about that?" David asked, his voice suddenly guarded. "Robert saw her with Jim Reynolds yesterday. They were looking at listings." Another long pause. "She mentioned wanting to look into investment properties," David said slowly. "Said it would be a good way to build wealth for the kids. Future. I told her we should focus on our current finances first, but she seemed pretty set on the idea." I chose my next words with extreme care. "Just make sure you're comfortable with any financial decisions. Big investments should be mutual choices." "Of course," David replied, but I detected a note of defensiveness. "Dad, I know you're concerned, but Sarah's making real efforts here. The counseling, being more open about her fears. It's progress." "It is," I agreed. "And I'm genuinely happy about that." We talked a bit longer about the kids, about work, about normal things. When we hung up, I sat in my quiet living room, turning the conversation over in my mind. Sarah was making efforts, attending counseling, acknowledging her insecurities. That was positive. But she was also looking at real estate with Jim Reynolds, possibly planning financial moves without David's full involvement. That was concerning. People are complicated, I reminded myself. Sarah could be both genuinely working on her issues and still harboring plans that served her need for control and security. The two weren't mutually exclusive. The question was, which impulse would ultimately win out? The desire for a healthier relationship, or the drive to secure her position at any cost? Only time would tell. And in the meantime, I would continue my own careful preparations, hoping they would never be needed, but ready if they were. I was learning that love and protection weren't opposing forces. They could work in tandem. I could love Sarah as my daughter-in-law, understand the roots of her behavior, hope for healing in her relationship with David, and still take steps to protect my family from potential harm. Margaret had understood this balance instinctively. "Love without wisdom is like a ship without a rudder," she used to say. It means well, but it rarely reaches its intended destination. As I readied myself for bed that night, I looked at Margaret's photograph and smiled. "I'm trying to be wise, love," I told her. "I hope I'm getting it right." In the quiet of my bedroom, I could almost hear her response. "Just keep your heart open and your eyes clear. The rest will follow." It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a path forward. And sometimes, a path is all we need to find our way home. The weeks that followed seemed to exist in a delicate balance between hope and caution. David and Sarah continued their counseling sessions, and bit by bit I saw small changes. David called more often, sometimes from work, where he could speak freely. The conversations were brief but meaningful. Updates about the kids, questions about my health, normal father-son exchanges that had once been routine, but now felt like precious gifts. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah remained distant, but the outright hostility had softened to a wary détente. She no longer hung up when I called, though her responses were minimal and cool. Progress, however slight, was still progress. Then, on a crisp Saturday morning in October, David texted, "Taking the kids to the park at 10, the one near your house. Meet us?" My heart leaped at the invitation. The park was just 2 blocks from my home, a charming space with old oak trees and a playground that had been modernized over the years but still retained its small-town charm. I'd taken David there countless times when he was a boy. "Does Sarah know?" I texted back, not wanting to cause problems. "Her idea," came the surprising reply. "Step forward. See you there." I arrived early, settling on a bench with a clear view of the playground. The morning was perfect, sunshine filtering through leaves just beginning to turn gold and crimson, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of autumn. I watched young families arrive, children's laughter filling the air, and felt a pang of longing for the days when David was small and the world was simpler. At precisely 10:05, David's car pulled into the small parking area. Emma and Noah tumbled out, racing toward the playground before David could even close his door. Sarah emerged more slowly, her posture stiff but determined. I stood as they approached, unsure of the protocol for this fragile new piece. Noah solved the dilemma by launching himself at me in a flying hug that nearly knocked me off balance. "Grandpa, we came to your park!" he exclaimed, arms tight around my waist. "I see that," I laughed, ruffling his hair. "I'm so happy you did." Emma approached more cautiously, but her smile was genuine. "Hi, Grandpa. Can I have my dollhouse back sometime?" Over her head, I caught Sarah's eye. She gave a small, tight nod. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, bending to hug her. "It's waiting for you whenever you want it." David embraced me next, a quick, firm hug that spoke volumes. Then, I was face to face with Sarah. "Frank," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Sarah?" I replied with a nod. "Thank you for suggesting this." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that I'd acknowledged her role in the meeting. "The kids have missed you," she said, which wasn't quite the same as saying she'd reconsidered her position. But it was something. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We settled into an awkward but civil coexistence as the children played. David sat between us on the bench, a physical buffer that seemed appropriate for the tentative nature of the reunion. We talked mostly about the kids, Emma's upcoming science fair, Noah's newfound interest in dinosaurs, safe topics that kept the conversation flowing without venturing into more sensitive territory. As the children ran and climbed and swung, I noticed Sarah watching them with an expression I recognized all too well, the fierce protectiveness of a parent who would do anything to keep their children safe and secure. It was the same look I'd seen on Margaret's face countless times, the same feeling I knew in my own heart. "They're wonderful kids," I said quietly. "You've done a great job with them." Sarah glanced at me, clearly caught off guard by the compliment. "Thank you," she said after a moment. "They're everything to me." "To all of us," I agreed. David's phone rang, breaking the moment. He checked the screen and frowned. "Work. I need to take this." He stood and walked a few paces away, leaving Sarah and me alone on the bench. The silence stretched between us, not comfortable, but not openly hostile either. Finally, Sarah spoke. "David says you've been respecting my boundaries, not pushing. He appreciates that." "So do I." I nodded, choosing my words carefully. "I want what's best for the family, all of the family." She turned to look at me directly, her expression unreadable. "Including me?" "Of course," I said, surprised by the question. "You're David's wife, Emma and Noah's mother. Your family, Sarah." She looked away, watching the children again. "Even after everything?" "Family isn't just for the easy times," I said gently. "It's for all times, the hard ones especially." She didn't respond, but I saw her swallow hard, blinking rapidly. When David returned, apologizing for the interruption, the moment passed, but something had shifted, however slightly. As we prepared to leave, Noah asked if he could have his action figure back. Before I could answer, Sarah surprised me. "Why don't we all go to Grandpa's house to get it?" she suggested. "Just for a little while." The children cheered, and David looked at his wife with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. I kept my expression neutral, not wanting to make too much of the olive branch, but inside, hope bloomed bright and warm. My house was only a short walk from the park. As we approached, I felt a sudden self-consciousness about what Sarah might think. The yard was neat but not manicured, the paint on the trim a bit faded, the garden less tended than when Margaret was alive. It wasn't a showplace, but it was home. "It's a nice neighborhood," Sarah commented as we walked up the drive. Not effusive praise, but not criticism either. "Margaret and I were lucky to find it when we did," I replied. Housing prices were reasonable back then, and the school district was excellent. Inside, the children immediately made themselves at home, Noah heading straight for the kitchen where cookies always seemed to appear as if by magic. Emma gravitating toward the bookshelves where Margaret's collection of children's classics still resided. "Can I get anyone something to drink?" I offered. "Coffee, tea, juice for the kids." "I'll help," Sarah said, following me to the kitchen. David raised his eyebrows slightly but didn't comment. In the kitchen, Sarah stood awkwardly, looking around at the modest space. The cabinets were original to the house, the countertops replaced only once in 40 years. Nothing fancy, but functional and clean. "It's very homey," she said, and I couldn't quite tell if it was a compliment or an observation. "Margaret made it that way," I said, filling the kettle. "I've tried to keep it up, but I lack her touch." Sarah moved to the refrigerator, where photographs were held by magnets. David as a boy, Emma and Noah as babies, Margaret and me on our 40th anniversary, the last one before her diagnosis. "You really loved her," Sarah said quietly. "With all my heart," I replied. "Still do." Sarah touched a photo of Margaret holding infant Emma, her first grandchild. "David says she was kind, that she welcomed me into the family." "She did," I confirmed. "She thought you were exactly what David needed, strong, determined, loving." Sarah looked genuinely surprised. "She said that?" "Many times." I hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. "She worried sometimes that you might hold on too tightly to things, to David, to security, because of what you'd lost in your own childhood, but she understood why." Sarah was silent for a long moment, still staring at the photograph. "I never knew my dad," she said finally. "He left when I was 3. No child support, no visits, just gone. My mom worked 2 jobs, and we still barely got by when the electricity was shut off, or we had to move in the middle of the night because the rent was late again. Those things stay with you." "I can't imagine how difficult that must have been," I said softly. She turned to face me, her expression more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. "When I met David, when I saw the kind of family he came from, stable, secure, loving, I wanted that so badly, maybe too badly. I became protective." "Protective is understandable," I said. "It's when protection becomes control that problems arise." She nodded slowly. "That's what our counselor says. That I'm trying to control outcomes because I grew up with so little control over my circumstances." It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had, and I didn't want to break the fragile trust by pushing too hard. I simply nodded and continued preparing the coffee. "The dollhouse," Sarah said suddenly. "It's beautiful. Emma talks about it all the time." "Thank you," I said. It was a labor of love. I shouldn't have sent it back. That was cruel. "It's here whenever she wants it," I repeated my earlier assurance. Before she could respond, Noah burst into the kitchen. "Found it, Grandpa. My dinosaur was under the couch." He held up the action figure triumphantly. The moment between Sarah and me passed, but something had changed. A door had opened, just a crack, but enough to let in a sliver of light. The visit lasted just under an hour. As they prepared to leave, I brought out the dollhouse, carefully wrapped. Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning, and even Sarah smiled at her daughter's joy. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly as David loaded the dollhouse into the car. It wasn't clear whether she meant for the dollhouse or for the conversation in the kitchen, but I nodded, understanding either way. "Anytime," I said. "All of you are welcome here. Anytime." As they drove away, I felt a cautious optimism I hadn't experienced in months. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time I felt we might actually be traveling in the same direction. Later that evening, as I was reading in my favorite chair, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Curious," I answered. "Mr. Hale?" a woman's voice inquired. "This is Dr. Melissa Chen. I'm the counselor working with your son and daughter-in-law." Surprised, I sat up straighter. "Yes, hello. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," she assured me. "I'm calling with Sarah and David's knowledge and permission. They mentioned you all had a visit today, and Sarah specifically asked if I would reach out to you." "Oh." I wasn't sure what to expect. We've been discussing family dynamics in our sessions, and Sarah has expressed a desire to work on her relationship with you. With your permission, I'd like to invite you to join us for a session next week." The invitation was so unexpected that for a moment I couldn't find words to respond. "Are you still there, Mr. Hale?" Dr. Chen asked. "Yes, sorry," I managed. "I'm just surprised. In a good way. I understand. This represents a significant step for Sarah. She's beginning to recognize that her fears about losing David and the children have led her to create the very isolation she was afraid of." "I'd be happy to join you," I said, meaning it wholeheartedly. "Whatever might help." "Excellent. How about Tuesday at 4 p.m.? My office is downtown, on Maple Street." After confirming the details, I hung up and sat in the quiet of my living room, letting the development sink in. Sarah had not only agreed to include me in a counseling session, but had actually requested it. It was more progress than I'd dared hope for so soon. I called Robert to share the news, knowing my friend would be as surprised as I was. "Well, I'll be damned," he said when I told him. "Didn't see that coming." "Me neither," I admitted. "But I'm cautiously optimistic. She opened up a bit today, talked about her childhood, her fears. There's a real person under all that defensiveness, Robert. Someone who's been hurt and is afraid of being hurt again." "Just be careful," he warned. "People can say all the right things in therapy and still have ulterior motives." "I know," I sighed. "Trust but verify, as they say. I'm not canceling my appointment with Patricia or anything. But I have to give Sarah a chance to show she's genuine about this." "Fair enough," Robert conceded. "Just don't let your guard down completely." "I won't," I promised. "But I won't go in assuming the worst either. That's no way to rebuild a relationship." Tuesday arrived with crisp autumn clarity, the kind of day that seems to sharpen the edges of everything. I dressed carefully for the counseling session, not too formally, which might suggest defensiveness, but neatly enough to show respect for the process. Dr. Chen's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, its interior warm and professional without feeling clinical. She greeted me in the waiting room, a petite woman with a firm handshake and kind eyes. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Hale," she said, leading me to her office where David and Sarah were already seated. "I think this will be a productive session for everyone." David stood to embrace me, his smile genuine. Sarah remained seated but nodded in greeting, her expression a mixture of determination and nervousness. "Before we begin," Dr. Chen said once I was settled, "I want to clarify the purpose of today's session. This isn't about assigning blame or rehashing past grievances. It's about understanding each person's perspective and finding a way forward that respects everyone's needs and boundaries. Does that sound reasonable to all of you?" We all nodded our agreement. Good. "Now, Sarah has requested the session because she wants to address some issues in her relationship with you, Frank. Sarah, would you like to start?" Sarah straightened in her chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I want to apologize," she began, her voice steady despite the obvious effort it took. "For cutting you out of our lives. For keeping the children from you. For not treating you with respect." I nodded, acknowledging her words but letting her continue. "I've been afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of losing the security I found with David and the kids. Afraid that if they were too close to you, I might become unnecessary." "Sarah," I said gently, "you could never be unnecessary to them. You're their mother, David's wife. That's irreplaceable. Logically, I know that," she said. "But fear isn't logical. And when I saw how much the kids adored you, how easily David turned to you for advice, it triggered all my old insecurities about being abandoned." Dr. Chen nodded encouragingly. "That's very insightful, Sarah. Frank, how do you respond to that?" I considered my words carefully. "I understand fear," I said. After Margaret died, I was terrified of being alone, of losing my connection to family. I probably leaned too heavily on David during that time. "You did," Sarah interjected, then quickly added, "but that doesn't justify how I responded." "We all make mistakes when we're hurting," I said. "The question is, where do we go from here?" Dr. Chen smiled slightly. "That's exactly the right question, Frank." "Sarah, David, what are your thoughts?" David spoke up for the first time. I want us to be a family again, all of us. I want my kids to know their grandfather. I want my wife and my father to have a relationship built on mutual respect, not fear and suspicion. Sarah nodded. I want that too. I'm willing to work for it. She looked directly at me. If you are. I am, I said without hesitation. Family is everything to me. Dr. Chen guided us through a practical discussion then. What boundaries would look like moving forward, how often visits might occur, how to communicate more openly and honestly. By the end of the hour, we had a tentative plan. Sunday dinners at my house twice a month, phone calls with the children on Wednesday evenings, and a standing invitation for David and Sarah to call me anytime they needed support, with the understanding that I would respect their independence as a couple. As we prepared to leave, Sarah hung back slightly, letting David walk ahead with Dr. Chen. There's something else, she said quietly. About the real estate listings Robert saw me looking at. I tensed slightly, but kept my expression neutral. Oh? I was looking at investment properties, she confirmed. But not for the reason you probably think. I was looking for a place that might be suitable for you if you ever wanted to downsize. Somewhere closer to us, but still your own space. Not a basement apartment, she added with a hint of embarrassment, but a real home. The admission caught me completely off guard. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, she said quickly. It was presumptuous of me. I realize now I was still trying to control things. Just in a different way, but I want you to know my intentions weren't what they might have seemed. Before I could respond, David called from the doorway. Everything okay? Sarah smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Yes, everything's fine. Just clearing the air. As we walked to the parking lot together, I felt a sense of cautious hope. The road ahead would still have its bumps and turns, but for the first time in months, it felt like we were all heading in the same direction. That Sunday, I hosted the first of our agreed-upon family dinners. I spent the morning cooking Margaret's famous pot roast, a dish that had always been David's favorite. I set the table with care, using the good dishes Margaret had always insisted were for special occasions, and this certainly qualified. They arrived promptly at 5, Emma and Noah rushing in with the boundless energy of children who feel at home. Sarah brought a homemade apple pie, still warm from the oven. Margaret's recipe, she said as she handed it to me. David found it in an old cookbook she gave us when we got married. I hope I did it justice. The gesture moved me deeply. I'm sure it's perfect, I said, accepting both the pie and the olive branch it represented. Dinner was not without its awkward moments. Conversations sometimes lapsed into silence, and certain topics were carefully avoided. But it was a beginning. Emma chattered about school, Noah demonstrated his impressive knowledge of dinosaur facts, and David relaxed visibly as the evening progressed, no longer feeling caught in an impossible position between his wife and his father. After dinner, as David helped me clear the table, he spoke in a low voice. Thank you for this. For giving Sarah another chance. For not giving up on us. I would never give up on you, I assured him. Any of you. In the living room, I found Sarah looking at the family photos on the mantel. She held one in particular. Margaret and me on our wedding day, young and radiant with hope for the future. She was beautiful, Sarah said as I approached. Inside and out. I agreed. Sarah set the photo back carefully. I wish I had known her better. Really known her, not just as David's mother, but as a person. She would have liked that too, I said, surprised by the wistfulness in Sarah's voice. David says I'm a lot like her in some ways, Sarah continued. Stubborn, protective of family. But she knew how to love without fear. That's what I'm trying to learn. Margaret wasn't perfect, I said gently. None of us are. But she understood that love grows when you share it, not when you hoard it. It took me losing her to fully appreciate that lesson. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I'm starting to understand that now. As they prepared to leave that evening, Sarah surprised me with a brief hug. Thank you, she whispered, for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. That's what family does, I replied simply. Standing in my doorway, Watching them drive away, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since Margaret's death. The family she and I had built together was finding its way forward, healing its fractures, learning to bend without breaking. I knew there would still be challenges ahead. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. Old fears and habits don't disappear overnight. But we had made a beginning, taken the first steps on a new path. Later, as I sat in my quiet house, I looked at Margaret's photograph and smiled. "You'd be proud of them," I told her. "Of all of us. We're finding our way back to each other." In the silence, I could almost hear her response. "Love always finds a way home if you leave the door open." And that's exactly what I intended to do. Keep the door open, the light on, and faith alive in the power of family to heal, to grow, and to endure. The seasons change with gentle inevitability, and so too did our family in the months that followed. Winter arrived with its soft blanket of snow, transforming my neighborhood into a postcard scene that reminded me of Christmases past when David was small and the world seemed simpler. This year, however, brought a different kind of magic, the kind that comes from healing what was once broken. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Our Sunday dinners had become a cherished tradition again. Every other week, David, Sarah, and the children arrived at my doorstep, their arms filled with contributions to our meal. Sarah's increasingly confident attempts at Margaret's recipes, Emma's handmade table decorations, Noah's carefully selected flowers from the grocery store bouquets David let him choose. The awkwardness of those early gatherings had gradually given way to a comfortable rhythm, a new normal that honored the past while creating its own memories. One snowy evening in mid-December, as we finished dinner and the children helped clear the table, a task they approached with surprising enthusiasm at my house, though David assured me this was not the case at home, Sarah surprised me with an unexpected invitation. "We'd like you to spend Christmas with us," she said, her voice casual, but her eyes watching me carefully for my reaction. "At our house. We thought you could come over Christmas Eve and stay through Christmas Day. If you want to, that is." The offer caught me off guard. Our twice-monthly dinners were one thing. Neutral territory, limited time, clear boundaries. This was something else entirely, an invitation back into the heart of their home, the very place I'd been banned from just months before. "I'd love that," I said simply, not wanting to make too much of the moment and risk overwhelming Sarah with the depth of my gratitude. She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Good. Emma's already planning where to hang your stocking." David, who had been listening nearby, squeezed my shoulder as he passed. "About time we had a proper family Christmas again," he said quietly. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That night after they had gone, I sat in my living room surrounded by the comfortable silence of my home and realized something profound had shifted. The olive branch Sarah had extended wasn't just a holiday invitation. It was an acknowledgement that I belonged in their family circle again. That the door once firmly closed against me was now standing open. I called Patricia the next morning to update her on the developments of the past few months. We had continued our careful estate planning despite the improving family situation, believing that prudence wasn't at odds with reconciliation. "It sounds like remarkable progress," she said after I'd filled her in. "Are you still proceeding with the trust modifications we discussed?" "Yes," I confirmed. "The improved relationship doesn't change my desire to protect everyone involved. If anything, it makes it more important to have everything properly structured. No more misunderstandings or false assumptions." "I agree," Patricia said approvingly. "Have you discussed any of this with David and Sarah?" "Not yet," I admitted. "I'm waiting for the right moment. The holidays don't seem appropriate." "Fair enough. But don't wait too long. Transparency in these matters prevents problems later." I promised to have the conversation in the new year, after the holiday season had passed and our new family dynamic had further solidified. As Christmas approached, I found myself filled with anticipation I hadn't experienced since Margaret was alive. I spent hours selecting the perfect gifts. Books for David that connected to our shared interests, a beautiful scarf for Sarah in her favorite shade of blue, information gleaned carefully from Emma during one of our phone calls, science kits for Emma, and dinosaur models for Noah. For Sarah, I had one additional gift, one I'd deliberated over for weeks. I wasn't sure if it was too much, too soon, but something told me the time was right. Christmas Eve arrived with perfect storybook weather, large, lazy snowflakes, drifting from a pearl gray sky, transforming the world into a hushed wonderland. I packed my overnight bag, loaded the carefully wrapped presents into my car, and made the familiar drive to David and Sarah's home. The house I'd once been barred from welcomed me with warm light spilling from every window. Holiday music drifted out as David opened the door, the scent of cinnamon and pine needles enveloping me like an embrace. "Dad!" "You made it." He greeted me, as if there had been some doubt, as if the past months of estrangement had never happened. The children swarmed me the moment I stepped inside, their excitement heightened by the magic of the holiday. Emma led me proudly to the fireplace where, true to Sarah's word, a stocking hung with my name embroidered across the cuff. "I did the stitching myself," she informed me solemnly. "Mom showed me how." Sarah appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Welcome, Frank," she said. And if her greeting lacked the effusiveness of the others, it still held genuine warmth. "I hope you're hungry." We might have gone a bit overboard with the Christmas Eve dinner. The evening unfolded in a tapestry of small, precious moments, helping Noah arrange cookies for Santa on a special plate, watching Emma's face glow as she recounted her school's holiday pageant, catching David's eye across the room and sharing a silent acknowledgement of how far we'd come. Even Sarah seemed more relaxed than I'd ever seen her, laughing easily at David's terrible Christmas jokes, her hand occasionally resting on his shoulder in unconscious affection. After the children were finally tucked in bed, vibrating with anticipation for the morning to come, the three adults settled in the living room with glasses of eggnog. The Christmas tree lights cast soft, colorful shadows across the room, and for a moment the scene felt so perfect it almost hurt. "Thank you for including me," I said simply, raising my glass in a small toast. David smiled, but it was Sarah who responded, her voice quiet but steady. "Thank you for giving us a second chance. For giving me a second chance." "Family is worth fighting for," I said. "Even when it's difficult." "Maybe especially then." Sarah set her glass down and smoothed her hands over her knees, a gesture I'd come to recognize as her preparing to say something important. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of work in therapy, about why I reacted the way I did, why I felt so threatened by your relationship with David and the kids." David reached for her hand, a silent show of support. "My father didn't just leave," she continued. "He replaced us. He has a whole new family now, wife, kids, the picture-perfect life. I found them on social media a few years ago. He coaches his son's baseball team, takes family vacations to Disney World, all the things he never did with me." Her voice didn't break, but I could see the old pain in her eyes. "I think I've always been waiting for history to repeat itself, for someone to come along and replace me." "Oh, Sarah," I said softly. "No one could ever replace you in this family." "Not ever." She nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "I know that now. Or I'm learning to know it. But old fears run deep." She took a breath. "Anyway, I wanted you to understand. It wasn't really about you. It was about me and my broken pieces." "We all have broken pieces," I said. "The trick is finding people who help us hold them together until they can heal." "Like Margaret did for you," she observed. "Like Margaret did for me." I agreed. "And like you do for David, and he does for you. And like you do for all of us," David added quietly. The moment was interrupted by a small noise on the stairs. We turned to find Emma peering through the banister rails, clearly having crept down to either catch Santa in the act or simply unable to contain her holiday excitement. "Caught you," David said with mock sternness. "Back to bed, young lady." "But I'm too excited to sleep," she protested. "How about a story?" I suggested. "One about Christmas when your dad was little." Emma's eyes lit up, and even Sarah nodded her approval. "Just one story," she stipulated. then straight back to bed. As I followed Emma back upstairs, her small hand trustingly in mine, I felt a sense of rightness, of pieces falling back into place. The broken circle of our family was mending, not to what it had been before, that was impossible, but to something new and equally precious. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, the sun transforming the snow-covered landscape into a dazzling expanse of diamond-like sparkles. I woke to the sound of excited whispers and small feet racing down the hallway, followed by David's voice gently reminding the children that 6 a.m. was too early even for Christmas. By 7, though, the living room was a whirlwind of torn wrapping paper and exclamations of delight. I watched from my place on the couch, soaking in the joy radiating from my grandchildren's faces, the easy affection between David and Sarah as they traded smiles over the children's heads. When the initial frenzy had subsided, I retrieved one last package from my overnight bag. "Sarah," I said, "this is for you. Well, you'll see." She accepted the small, carefully wrapped box with a curious expression. Inside was a velvet jewelry case, and within that, a silver locket. It was an antique piece, simple but elegant, with a delicate filigree pattern on its surface. "It's beautiful," she said, clearly surprised by the personal nature of the gift. "Open it," I encouraged gently. She did, and her breath caught. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, one of Margaret, smiling warmly at the camera, and one of Sarah herself, caught in a moment of laughter during one of our recent Sunday dinners. "Margaret wore this for years," I explained. "It originally held a picture of her mother, who died when she was young. She always said it helped her feel connected to the family she'd lost." I thought you might appreciate having a connection to the family member you never really got to know." Sarah's eyes glistened with tears, her fingers tracing the delicate silver. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't need to say anything," I assured her. "Just know that in Margaret's eyes and in mine, you have always been family, even when things were difficult between us." She clasped the locket around her neck with trembling fingers, then surprised me by moving to embrace me tightly. "Thank you," she murmured against my shoulder, "for understanding, for not giving up on me." David watched us with suspiciously bright eyes, while the children, momentarily distracted from their new treasures, looked on with the simple acceptance of the young, for whom reconciliation is the most natural thing in the world. The rest of Christmas Day passed in a blur of food, games, and laughter. Sarah and I worked side by side in the kitchen preparing dinner, our movements becoming more synchronized as we found a rhythm together. The tension that had once filled the space between us had been replaced by something new. Not quite the easy familiarity of old friends, but the promising beginning of a genuine connection. As evening approached and the children grew drowsy from excitement and too many Christmas cookies, David suggested we all bundle up for a walk through the neighborhood to see the holiday lights. Emma and Noah rallied at the prospect of a new adventure, and soon we were all wrapped in coats and scarves, venturing out into the crisp winter air. The neighborhood was transformed into a magical landscape of colored lights and festive displays. Noah ran ahead, pointing out every inflatable Santa with the enthusiasm only a 5-year-old can muster. Emma walked between David and Sarah, holding their hands and occasionally swinging between them with delighted giggles. I followed a few steps behind, content to watch my family move through this enchanted evening. At one particularly spectacular display, Sarah turned and beckoned to me. "Frank, come take a picture with us," she called, her breath clouding in the cold air. "We should have a family photo by these lights." A family photo! Such a simple thing, yet the invitation spoke volumes. I joined them, standing beside Sarah, as David set up his phone on a timer. In the resulting image, captured in a flash against the backdrop of twinkling lights, we looked like what we were slowly becoming again, a family. Different from before, changed by our struggles, but perhaps stronger for having weathered them together. As we walked back to the house, Emma slipped her mitten-covered hand into mine. "This was the best Christmas ever, Grandpa," she declared, with the absolute certainty of childhood. It certainly was. I agreed, my heart full. Back inside, as we shed layers of winter clothing and Sarah made hot chocolate for everyone, I found myself thinking of Margaret. She would have loved this day. would have delighted in seeing our family whole again. In a way, she was part of it still. In the recipes Sarah had carefully followed, in the traditions we maintained, in the love that had survived even when tested by pain and fear. After the children were finally in bed, exhausted from the day's excitement, the three adults sat in the quiet living room, the tree lights providing the only illumination. David had fallen asleep in his armchair, his face relaxed and boyish in repose. "He still looks like that little boy who couldn't sleep on Christmas Eve," I remarked softly. Sarah smiled, her fingers absently touching the locket at her throat. "He talks about his childhood a lot, how safe and happy it was. I want that for our kids." "You're giving them that," I assured her. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I thought I needed to keep our family separate to make it strong. To keep it mine. I was wrong." "It's a natural instinct to protect what matters to us," I said. "Sometimes we just need to redefine what protection looks like. The counselor says I was building walls when I should have been building bridges." She glanced at me. "Thank you for being patient enough to wait until I figured that out." "That's what family does," I replied simply. "We wait for each other. We find our way back to each other, even when the path isn't clear." She nodded, looking thoughtful. "After my father left, I never thought I'd have a real family again. Then I met David, and it seemed too good to be true. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. And when Margaret died and I leaned heavily on David, it felt like the beginning of losing him." She finished. "Yes, exactly. I understand that fear," I said. "After Margaret died, I was terrified of being alone, of losing my connection to the only family I had left. We were both acting from fear, in our own ways." "But fear is a terrible compass," Sarah said, echoing what I suspected were her therapist's words. "It leads you away from the very things you need most." "Indeed it does," I agreed. "The antidote to fear is trust. And trust takes time to rebuild once it's been damaged." She looked at me directly, her expression open and earnest. "I want to rebuild it. For David, for the kids, for all of us." "We're already well on our way," I assured her. The next morning, as I prepared to drive home, I found Sarah in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The children were still asleep, and David was in the shower. It was the first time we'd been truly alone since my arrival. "I wanted to talk to you about something," she said, her voice steady, but with an undertone of nervousness. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about redefining what protection looks like." I nodded, wondering where this was heading. "I know I was difficult about financial matters," she continued, choosing her words carefully. "I worried too much about security, about making sure the kids would always be provided for. I went about it the wrong way." "We all want security for our loved ones," I said. "There's nothing wrong with that." She nodded, then took a deep breath. "I'd like to be more transparent about our finances with you, and I'd like you to be transparent with us. No more assumptions or suspicions on either side. Just family taking care of family, in the open." It was exactly the opening I'd been waiting for, the perfect opportunity to discuss the estate planning Patricia and I had been working on. But something held me back. This moment, this fragile new trust between us, felt too important to complicate with legal discussions. "I'd like that very much," I said instead. "After the holidays, perhaps we could all sit down together. Talk about the future. About what security really means for this family." She smiled, relief evident in her expression. "I'd like that." Before I left, I hugged each of my grandchildren tightly, promising to see them soon for our next Sunday dinner. David embraced me with the easy affection that had characterized our relationship before all the trouble began. Sarah's goodbye was less effusive, but no less genuine. "Thank you for coming," she said. "For making our Christmas complete." "Thank you for inviting me back into your home," I replied. "It means more than I can say." As I drove home through the winter landscape, I reflected on the journey of the past months. From exclusion to invitation, from suspicion to trust, from brokenness to healing. It hadn't been easy, and there were surely more challenges ahead, but we had found our way back to each other. This imperfect, wonderful family of mine, Margaret, would have been proud of us all, of David's patient love, of Sarah's courage in confronting her fears, of my own determination not to give up on the family we had built together. She had always believed that love was the most powerful force in the universe, capable of overcoming any obstacle if given time and space to work its quiet magic. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something on my front porch, a package wrapped in cheerful paper. Curious, I carried it inside along with my overnight bag. The tag read simply, "One more gift. Love, Sarah." Inside was a framed photograph, the family picture we had taken the previous evening against the backdrop of Christmas lights. All of us together, smiling despite the cold, connected despite our past divisions. On the back, Sarah had written in her neat handwriting, "Family isn't always perfect, but it's always worth fighting for. Thank you for fighting for us." I placed the photograph on my mantle, alongside the others that chronicled my life's journey. It seemed right there, a new chapter in an ongoing story, a testament to the resilience of family bonds. In the quiet of my house, I spoke aloud to Margaret as I often did, knowing she wasn't there but finding comfort in the ritual nonetheless. We did it, love. We found our way back to each other. It's different now. But it's good. It's very good. And in the stillness, I could almost hear her reply, "Love always finds a way home, if you leave the door open and the light on." The new year would bring its own challenges and joys, its own opportunities for growth and connection. But whatever came, we would face it together. Not as perfect people, but as a family committed to choosing love over fear, bridge building over wall building, patience over judgment. In the end, that's all any of us can do. Keep our hearts open, our lights on, and our faith alive in the power of love to heal what fear has broken. It's a lesson worth learning, worth teaching, worth living, every single day. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.